If you look at where the price of gold was when the Federal Reserve came into existence, you needed $20, 20 Federal Reserve notes to buy an ounce of gold. Now you need almost 2,000. That's 1,900 and change, but let's just call it 2,000. That means that the dollar or the Federal Reserve note has lost 95% of its purchasing power. No, 99% of its purchasing power, because you need 100 times as many dollars to buy an ounce of gold today as you did when they established the Federal Reserve. There's no longer any link really to what we call the dollar and gold. Now, what we call the dollar is a Federal Reserve note, but it's not even a legitimate Federal Reserve note because a note promises to pay something. Now, once upon a time when the Federal Reserve began in 1913, the Federal Reserve notes did promise to pay something. They promised to pay dollars. What was a dollar? A dollar was defined as a weight of gold or silver. So Federal Reserve notes were liabilities of the Fed where they promised to pay the bearer on demand real dollars. But those Federal Reserve notes could circulate in commerce as a medium of exchange, as a substitute for those dollars. That's why they're a money substitute. Currency, by definition, is a money substitute. It's currency backed by real money, because real money has to have intrinsic value. That's one of the properties that money has to have. It needs to be a store of value. So a piece of paper doesn't store anything. What gave the Federal Reserve notes value is the fact that they represented ownership of real money, dollars, that were a defined weight of gold or silver. When the Federal Reserve note initially came out, $20 was 1 ounce of gold. That's literally what it was. And so if you had a $20 bill, it was a Federal Reserve note that obligated the Federal Reserve to give you an ounce of gold. You know, it had a coin, like a U.S. government coin that it minted, and you got that for your 20. But now you don't get anything. If you have a 20, they'll give you two 10s or 4 5s, but you're not going to get any real money. You're just going to get another piece of worthless paper. Now, ever since we went off the gold standard officially in 1971, and those Federal Reserve notes were just worth whatever the market would bear, people still ascribe value to Federal Reserve notes because other people will accept them in payment for goods and services. And of course, the government requires that taxes be paid in those notes. And so since most people don't want to go to jail, they need to accumulate these Federal Reserve notes to pay their taxes. And so that's basically what the system is built on. It's built on confidence and government force, because the government forces us to pay taxes in this currency. You can't pay your taxes in anything else. Even if you have gold or silver, or if you have euros or Swiss francs or Japanese yen, you can't pay your taxes with those currencies. The U.S. government doesn't accept them. You have to sell those currencies or sell that metal to get dollars, Federal Reserve notes, and then you can pay your taxes. Well, hyperinflation is not inevitable, and I would still think that it's more likely that we won't end with hyperinflation. But I think that there's going to be very high inflation. There's no question about that. So the dollar won't lose 100% of its value, but it could lose 50% of its value very easily. It could lose 70 or 80% or maybe even 90% of its value without going to zero. But in order to prevent the dollar from going to zero, eventually the government is going to have to do the right thing. Now, the longer it waits to do the right thing, the closer to zero we're going to come before they finally do the right thing. But doing the right thing is going to involve a lot of, short-term pain, although we're probably going to have a lot of short-term pain before they even have a catalyst to do the right thing. But, they're going to have to let people lose money. They're going to have to let companies fail, banks fail, depositors lose money. They're going to have to be honest and cut benefits like Social Security and Medicare and government pensions and cut national defense. They're going to have to act fiscally responsibly, something that they've never done. And the reason they don't want to do it is because the voters don't like it. Well, they're not going to like massive inflation either. But at some point, if we want to prevent, hyperinflation, which would be the worst possible outcome, then politicians and the Fed, they're going to have to do the opposite of what they've been doing. And that is, act responsibly. So interest rates need to be much higher than they are now. And that means a lot of debts are going to go into default. And a lot of people are going to lose money because they can't get paid. Where Nixon could have done the right thing and stayed on the gold standard. And he could have devalued the dollar a bit, but stayed on the gold standard, cut government spending, told people we can't have guns and butter. We're going to have to cut back on some of this spending from the Great Society and, these programs. But no, he chose not to do that. And, here we are 50 years later, the problems are much worse because back in 1971, the U.S. was still the world's largest creditor nation. Now we're the world's biggest debtor nation. Back then, we had huge trade surpluses. Now we have massive trade deficits. So all of this is the consequence of, 50 years of kicking a can down the road.